All right, hope you all are doing well. Today we're going to be looking at a code snippet that practices object-oriented programming. In particular, we're working with a class where one of the attributes is an instance of another class. So let's get started. So, as always, start out by just reminding everyone that the whole reason for a memory diagram is to teach you how to read like a computer does. So, computers read from top to bottom, they read left to right, and then they read inside to out. That is to say, you have to evaluate an expression on the inside before you can evaluate the outer expression. Let's get started. So we start at the very top and we have a class definition. Uh, so for this, we're going to state the class name as a knight. I'm going to give it an ID and store it over on the heap. It's defined from lines 1 through the last indented line underneath the class title, so 1 through 9. We have it tied global, so if while we're working through here we come across a knight object, we know where to find it. Next, we do the exact same thing for castle. The castle class. And this is defined from lines 11 to line 38. Tie it back to the stack, and we're ready to roll. Great, so now we have our first global variable named Lancelot. I'm used to writing in cursive, so pardon my infant-like print. Great. So, what is Lancelot? Well, Lancelot is a knight object, and we are creating this object using the constructor. We know it's a constructor because the name of this function call, and we know it's a function call because of these parentheses, but the name of this function call is the exact same name as its type. This lets us know we're calling the constructor of that class. In particular, we know that we're calling the init method. Remember, the init method is a constructor method that is what allows us to create this object. So great, we want to put something in here, but in order to do that, we need to call our first method. I'll leave myself a little bit of room here. Great, so we start any method with the name of the class it's defined in. Use the hashtag to note that it is the knight class, and then the name of the method is knight. Just like a function, methods get a return address and a return value. This return address is on line 41. It's where we were creating it. So line 41. And let's see. Has two parameters, self and name, which is a stir. Self is we're going to hold off on. Name is easy, right? Name we passed in was Lancelot, so that goes in here. Capital Lancelt. Great. Now what about self? Well, self is what allows us to create this object. And how do we do that? Well, we look directly underneath the class for its attributes. This just has one attribute, the name. It's called the name of the attribute is name, and it's of type stir. Over here, we're going to build this object. So ID2 is a night object. It has one attribute, name. And for the moment, this attribute remains empty. We have not told our computer to put anything inside of here yet. We do have a passed-in parameter of name, which is Lancelot, but until we get to this line right here, we can't really do anything with it. But luckily, we are ready to get into that line there. Okay. This line says self.name is set to name. Remember, single equal sign means set to, not equal. So self.name, oop, oh my goodness, I almost forgot. We got to tie our object to the stack. Great. Now we can do this. Self.name. Well, self takes us to this object, and then name takes us to this attribute. So we're saying, hey, go to self, go to its name attribute, set it to whatever's stored in name. Name is Lancelot, so we're setting self.name to be Lancelot. Cool. Are we done? Fortunately not. Remember, the init method is a special magic method in that it does not specify any sort of return type. It doesn't have any sort of return statement, right? But it does return something. In particular, it returns self, which makes sense. If we want to use self within the context of Lancelot and globals, we need some way to access it, right? As soon as we leave this frame goes out of scope and we're back in globals. If we don't have this ID right here, we can't access this object. So we have to return the value stored in self, which is ID2. As soon as we get our return value, we bring it back to our return address, and we store it in Lancelot. So ID2 is going to be Lancelot. Great. Moving right along. Next line, line 42, creating another variable named myCastle. What are we going to store in it? Well, again, we have made a call to the castle constructor. We're going to be creating a castle object. And that means we have to bring our arguments up here to this init method because we're creating a castle object. Well, let's do that. Let's create our castle train. Again, starting out with the class name and the hashtag. This is an init method for the castle class. We have a return address and a return value. What's our return address? 942. Get our self going. What's self? Well, self is going to be a blueprint of these attributes in particular. Two attributes, guard and rubbage up, which is a boolean. Guard is going to be our knight. Let's go ahead and do this. Let me see. Do I have... Great. I don't have any more objects that I need to make, so give ourselves a lot of room here. The next available ID is 3. The castle object. Value, or two attributes. guard and drawbridge up, guard, drawbridge, underscore. Great. Those are empty for now. But we are able to tie our ID back to self. ID3. Then we have one more parameter to build. Excuse me. Two more parameters to build. We have guard and we have bridge up. Guard. Bridge. And then we come down here, see what our the values of these arguments are. First one is Lancelot. Well, we're in globals right now. So what is Lancelot in globals? It is ID2. So the value of guard is going to be ID2. And then bridge up. Bridge up is our final one, false. This links up with bridge up, which is a boolean. False. Great. Now are we done? No, we haven't even stepped into this function yet. First, we assign self.guard to be guard, and then we assign self.drawbridge up to be bridge up. Well, self takes us here, and then self.guard is this slot, and self.drawbridge up is going to be this slot. We're assigning guard to this slot, so ID2 will go in here. And we're assigning bridge up to be in self.drawbridge up, so false. Or bridges down. Great. Finally, can't forget, in a method, gotta return self. So ID3 goes in as our return value, and as soon as we have a return value, we bring it back to the return address in globals, and we're assigning it to my castle. So ID3 goes into my castle. Well, alright, now we're getting into the meat and potatoes here. What's next? We're asked to print my castle. Well, this is interesting, right? If we were to print my castle, wouldn't we just print ID3? That's what's stored in my castle? Well, without the stir magic method, this is what we would print. Well, we would print a very long hexadecimal number representative of where this is stored over here in the heap somewhere. But since we do have a stir magic method for our castle class, when we call print on that object, we are instead calling stir on that object. Remember, anytime you call print, it actually calls stir on anything inside of it, which returns a string, which then can be printed out. But in this case, we're calling the stir magic method on my castle. So let's go ahead and create that frame. Again, we're working with the castle object. And we're working with the stir magic method. Current address is line 43. I don't have a return value yet. I have a feeling it's going to be a bit long. Oh, what does stir take in as arguments? Well, it takes in self. Well, what's self? Well, self is going to be the value stored in my castle. So ID3. Great. Well, what? now we can enter our function. So if self.drawbridge up, self takes us here, and we're asking if self.drawbridge up is true, right? If it is true, then this if statement evaluates to true, and then we can evaluate this line right here. However, it is false. So we're essentially saying if false, which does not allow us to enter this block, and instead we have to go to this else block. So what are we doing? Well, we're returning a string. So let's start to build this string, shall we? We have guarded by shoot self.guard. Okay. Well, what is self.guard? Self.guard, remember, is ID2. So we ran into the same problem that we did with my castle. Luckily, we also have a stir magic method for knight. Remember, an F string takes whatever is inside the curly braces and automatically turns it into a string. It calls stir on that. So we, in turn, have to call, before we can even finish this F string, we have to call the stir magic method on the guard. Well, let's do that. Guard. Oops. It's actually a knight class. Great. All right, let's set this up. Return address. Where is it? Line 24. What's self? Well, passing this in to here, right? Well, self.guard is ID3, takes us to guard, which brings us to ID2. So ID2 is going to be our self. Right. That's all we needed to get into here. So what do we do with this? Well, we're returning an S string. We're returning sir and then self.name. Okay, hopefully we don't run into the same problem we did last time. Let's see. ID2 brings us here to name, thank God. It's just a string. So all we have to do here is return Sir Lancelot. Well, as soon as we have a return value, return it back to our return address. Line 24. What were we doing? We were building this F string. We had gotten to guarded by, and then we needed to call this stir magic method to get this self.guard. Well, we got that value, Sir Lancelot, so let's just go ahead and throw it right in there. Sir Lancelot. And then what else we got? Oops. Pardon me. All right, sorry about those technical difficulties. So what are we doing? We're building this F string, so guarded by Sir Lancelot, but open to all. But open to all. Great. We've completed that return value, so we're ready to return it back to where it was called, line 43. We were just printing my castle, so this whole thing right here, it's replaced with this. What do we do with it? Well, we print it. So in output, down a little bit. Output, rewrite, guarded by Sir Lancelot. Open to all. Oops. I just realized I forgot that exclamation point, so let's get that in there. Great. Well, so we are done with line 43 now. Line 44. Here we go. What are we doing on line 44? Well, we're calling the close method on myCastle. Remember, this is how we call methods on objects. This is the syntax. It's the name of the object, and we have this dot, and then we have the name of the method. Luckily, the close method doesn't have any other arguments, so we're just looking at self here. Let's look. Yep, and checks out. Self is the only argument. In this case, self is myCastle. So we're looking at ID3 as our argument for myCastle. But let's go ahead and build this frame. So again, we're calling the castle method. Start with castle hashtag. Calling the close method. Our return address of line 44, and a return value which we don't know yet. What are we doing? Let's see. Well, we don't actually have a return value, but that's fine. We'll put this in later. Let's go ahead and build our parameter. So self, and the argument is, remember, ID3. What myCastle is in globals. Well, we're ready to step in. If not, self.drawBridge up. Well, what the hell does that mean? Well, let's just analyze self.drawBridge. Self brings us up here. Drawbridge up brings us here. Okay, well, we can just replace this. Sorry. We can just replace this with false. So if not false, so this whole thing gets replaced with true. And because the statement is following this if statement, or this if keyword is true, we are allowed to enter this else block, or this if block. Oh, so what are we doing? Well, we're printing, pull up the drawbridge. Cool, let's do that. All right, accidentally put quotes in output. Oh, what are we printing again? We're printing pull up the drawbridge. So pull drawbridge. Exclamation point. Oh, and then what? Then we're done with this line. Moving on to this line. Self.drawbridge up and set to true. Self moves us here. Drawbridge up. We're setting to true. I'm gonna go ahead and make a little room in here. Was false. Now it is true. Groovy. We skip this else block, and then we have hit the end of our method. We don't have a return statement we've encountered. We have specified that none is the return type, so put a none in this slot. As soon as we have something in a return value slot, we immediately go back to the return address, so line 44. Well, done with line 44, and we have been asked to print myCastle once again. Remember, printing castle is what sent us on this little route, so At the end of this, we can probably expect to have another stir frame and another night frame. So let's get into it. Call and stir on castle. So we have castle class method. Call and stir. Return address is line 45. Return value, we don't know yet, but it'll probably be a nice long string. And self. Self is, again, what was stored in my castle, so ID 3. Put in ID 3 here. Now we're ready to step in. If self.drawbridge up, do this, else do this. Is self.drawbridge up true? Self drawbridge is true. Cool. We have a different option here. What do we want to do? Well, this is true, so we're allowed to enter this if block, and we are returning guarded by. Let's get started. Guarded by. Who's it guarded by? Well, self.guard. Well, self.guard is ID2. So, again, because ID2 is a night class, we are calling the stir on the night object. So again, call and stir on the night object. Return address. What is our return address? D2. Return value, we don't have that yet. But we do have self. Self is what's passed in to our stir, to creating this stir. So self.guard, remember, brought us here, which brought us to here. So self, in this instance, is ID2. Okay. Now we're inside of here. What are we doing? Well, again, we're just returning this string, sir, with self.name. Well, sir is easy, SIR, space, and then self.name. Well, self is ID2, brings up to here, and name is the string Lancelot. So our return value is just Sir Lancelot. And if we have a return value, bring it back to our return address, which is line 22, where we were just building this F string. So down here, we get to add Sir Lancelot. And what else? And close to outsiders. And closed to outsiders. If I had a hunch, let's say there's an exclamation point there. Closed to outsiders. Yes, it is. Cool. So we have our return value completed. Let's bring it back to our return address. Line 45. This whole thing gets replaced with this string and gets printed to output. So our final value in output is guarded by Sir Lancelot. Oops, right in cursive. Lancelot and closed to outsiders. Exclamation. That ends our code snippet. Quite a bit longer than we thought. You know, we just saw two creations of objects and 2 calls to print and a method call. You would think 5, but we ended up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 because of that double call to stir. Cool. Hope this was helpful. If you're at all confused with any of this, please bring it to office hours or tutoring, and you'll definitely get help from a TA that is happy to help you. Cool. Hope you all have a good one. Take it easy.